set for integral leadership in action. We are so excited to have Ron Laurie coming all the way in from Melbourne, Australia, the Down Under.
Yeah.
He is a leadership and business growth advisor, a facilitator, certified advisory board chair, and coach. And he thinks deep thoughts about how organizations run and how they can become more integral, I hope. So, we're going to hear a really cool presentation today. And we're going to be diving deep into a lot of interesting models. So, we're going to be hearing the 4 quadrants meet the 5 systems, integrating Stanford beer. It's really
Stafford
beer.
beer. Hmm.
Anything with beer is good, right, guys? Anything with beer, I'm on board. Beer's VSM and Wilber's AQAL for organizational transformation. Put your hands together for Ron Laurie.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Lovely, lovely to be here, and so honored to be part of ILiA and helping everyone sort of engage in our new world as it's unfolding and emerging. All right, so let me go straight to sharing the deck. Let me just do that now, and hopefully that is visible to you all. If you can just give me a thumbs up, you see that on the screen there. Terrific. All right, so what I'm going to do is just walk through the VSM. Now, the VSM is short for Stafford Beer's Viable Systems Model. Stafford Beer was a cybernetics consultant out of the UK, probably most prominent around the 70s. And I'll give at the end of the presentation, I'll give you some ideas of where this particular model was applied and where I have applied it on a number of occasions with the work I do with organizational development. All right, so let's go. And so, first of all, just before we get going and into the model, I'm particularly fond of this quotation, and it is: the purpose of models is not to fit data into, but to sharpen the questions that we may have about what is unfolding for us. So if we think about Wilber's quadrants, you know, I think what it does is really sharpens the questions that we have about reality and about where we fit. So I find that the viable systems model is an excellent way to sharpen the questions you may have when you're engaging this or applying this to an organization. And out of those questions come interesting answers and often cause the route for further exploration with that organization. All right, so just to make a connection here, what we're going to do is we're going to make a very strong relationship. Let me just get my puppy out the road there. We're going to make a very strong relationship to upper right-hand quadrant and an observable objective look at the human form. And in using this as the basis of what is the human form, what does being a human tell us about how we might actually organize structure or organizations. And so, as you'll see, is the basis of the VSM is based upon the way or the physiology of the human being. And that is where its inspiration came from. So we're really over on the right-hand side of the quadrants, upper right, lower right, in terms of systemic understanding of organizational structure and the individual organism, the body of the human being. That's the relationship we're going to make, and I think that'll be plain as we go through it. So, you know, as we can see here, Michelangelo's classic demonstration of the holistic nature of the human being and the fullness of humanness. And so, as the basis of looking at this, we're going to look at how the viable systems model is peeled from the anatomy and the physiology of the human being. So what I have just highlighted here, and I'll just go back as we look at that and then sort of see this graphic coming up between the image here. You see at the top, we have the brain, and at the bottom of this image here, we have the muscles, the heart, the liver, all the functionings of the human interior landscape, of the interior parts of the human. And at the top, we have the brain. Now, for the purposes of this exercise, what we're going to describe this part as is the external environment, right? So if you can imagine yourself, you're a human being, you are in a sense a whole on, and you're engaging in the external environment. So we're artificially going to pull away and demonstrate how the human being operates in the environment, and as by example of that, how the organization operates in the external environment. So we'll go through each of the components of the viable systems model, pulling on this schematic. So you'll see the lines that interact across each of these areas. What I would like you to consider them as relationships. So we venture away a little bit into the lower left-hand quadrant here. Relationships, interpersonal relationships, exchanging of information between individuals and people. And that, in a sense, is what's going to tie us into the viable systems model as well. All right, so I'll flick back and forward from slide to slide just so you get the graphic. So we're going to call the brain part of the model, or the human being, as the meta system. We're going to refer to the bodily functions, the muscles, the heart, as the operations. And as we sort of said, that both the meta system and the operation of the human being is engaged in an external environment. And so for this model, we just artificially pulled the environment out to separate from the meta system and the operational system that we are. So first three sort of aspects of this is the meta system, the brain, the operations of the things that get done with our muscles, and the environment in which we exist in. So that's the first part to think about. Let's move on to the next component. And so what you see here being pulled apart, yet we are the total human being, and that our operations, the functioning of the body, and our head and our brain existing in an external environment. So here we take the expanded sort of view of the top part, and this is the operations of our body. And here we begin to introduce you to what Stafford Beer calls each of the systems. The systems. So we're going to talk about system one, and system one is operations. The operations, the things that get done. System two is the coordination of those operations. System three is the control of those operations within the system one. System four is the intelligence, our capacity to think and reason and logic. And system five is policy. You could see system five, policy, as being the upper neocortex of the human brain. The intelligence being the way in which we move information around in our brain. The control is really the sympathetic nervous system. The coordination is really how all these parts fit together in order to make the operations work. All right, so that's the basic framework. Let me just put these two together. In what is described here, this is a classic Stafford Beer depiction of the viable systems. And so we have the operations as the big system, the meta system, and the environment. And you can see here we have system 1, system 2, system 3, system 4, system 5, all functioning in an external environment. So I pulled it apart artificially. All right, so we will sort of elaborate on this, and we'll make relationships between this and how organizations can learn from these systems to achieve more accuracy, efficiency, and productivity. So in other words, much like the human being operates under optimum conditions, what we're trying to do is to identify where organizations can operate under optimum conditions. So what can we learn from the human body that can inform organizations, and even vice versa? All right, so might just stop there for a moment, because this is the fundamental basics of what we're going to be exploring. Any questions from anyone so far? Yeah, Will.
So is this a model for any complex system in the world,
Absolutely. Yeah,
whether
absolutely,
it's
Will.
biological, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
biological or industrial or a
Yeah.
computer or kind of anything, a city?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we'll see later on that this has been applied to nation states
Oh,
as
okay,
well, in,
great.
in Chile being a key example of Stafford Beer's work. Yeah, yeah. All right. Any other questions? Clear? Yep. Okay, let's go forward to the application of this. Now that we've got these operational systems or systems, we'll see what happens. All right, so let's just think about the human brain and think about the organization that we might be involved in. The one of the books that Stafford Beer wrote was The Brain of the Firm. And if not quite familiar, in the United Kingdom, organizations are often described as firms, right? So just keep that in mind in terms of that correlation. So he talked about the brain of the firm. So the brain of the organization, much like the brain of a human being. So here we have it as one sort of part in focus, the meta system. So system 2 coordinates what goes on in the organization. System 3 coordinates what's going on in the organization. System 4 is the intelligence of the organization. And system 5 is the policy making aspect of the organization. Now, the interrelationship between these systems is important. That's where the energy is. That is where we can find out where dysfunction happens in organizations. When we look at, is the organization really coordinating its operations? Or is the organization really in control of the operations? Is the organization looking out into the environment to see what's coming in a foresight sort of aspect, and looking into the future and understanding what's outside and next? And then it sort of relates that to the policy of the organization, which is system 5, and sort of says to itself, what I see happening in the external environment, how does that align with our policy? Is it in line with our policy? And do we want to incorporate what we see happening outside the organization and next? And do we want to realign our organization, or do we want to reformulate our policy so we're in alignment with what's happening outside and next. So the policy, the System 5 and the System 4 intelligence is really looking at into the future. Now, the purple sort of interactions here that you see between System 4 and System 3, it's a dialogue that happens between intelligence, what's outside and next, and control, what's inside and now. So a typical conversation or relationship might be an organization looking outside through its eyes and seeing there's a change in the marketplace. Let's just say, for example, they're looking at the marketplace and seeing the upsurge of artificial intelligence, right? They're seeing that happening in the outside. Then they might go to the control, what's happening inside and now in the organization. And it might have a dialogue with the control saying, do we want to incorporate into our operating system artificial intelligence? Now, the system or the control system 3 of the inside and now might say, no, we don't want to do that just now. We are interested in maintaining optimum people engagement in our organization. For the time being, we don't want to incorporate artificial intelligence. So there's a dialogue that happens between what's outside and next and what's happening inside and now in an organization. And this is important because if you can imagine ourselves as human beings, we look outside into our external environment and we often reconfigure or reassess with inside ourselves whether we want to be part of that or not. And so we have a sense of control of what we want to engage in and what we don't. So this is the meta system or the brain of the firm, as Stafford Beer described it. Now, System 2, System 3, System 4, and System 5 are all interrelated. They're in conversations in relationship with each other. And obviously, they have a conversation, particularly when it comes to inside and now, a conversation with the operations of the system. And so you can see in this example, this is System 1 world in terms of an organization. And this is maybe multiple operational units. Just for example, this operational unit might have something to do with marketing. This operational unit might have something to do with manufacturing or production. And this system or operational one might have something to do with sales and customer relationships, right? So these are the components within the organizations which are in interaction with each other. And you can see with the red lines that there is communication between each of these systems here, which often have to be coordinated. So you can imagine within an organization that the marketing has to coordinate their activities with the sales department. The sales department have to coordinate their activities with the manufacturing department. Now that coordination is really a systems 2 function. Let me go back here. As you can see, System 2 here is pointing down to the operations, and certainly the allocation of resources of the organization is System 3 work. So when we look at organizations, we realize that multiple systems in multiple parts of an organization. And if we sort of think about it from an integral perspective, it's really holonic. There's levels and recursions that repeat right through organizations. And if I could address what William was alluding to, you could apply this to a simple organization, or you could apply it to nation states. And obviously, the degree of complexity with the operations is dependent upon how many operational units that you'd be actually working with. So each one of these operational units engages in the external environment. And you can see up here, operations, the external environment. They're really doing the work, which is inside and now. It's kind of like the day-to-day practices or the business as usual function of an organization in this operational capacity, whereas the meta system is looking at the environment itself, but looking at the future and what's happening next. And so you can see that the relationship between the brain of the firm and the operational units is an ongoing dialogue that has to happen in order for it to be functioning adequately. Okay, let me go to the next piece where we see that the multiple operational units within an organization here, as you can see, which are mini viable systems in themselves. You can see that the recursive nature of this model is that you have the big system and then the recursive. Each layer, if you like, can go further and further and further down to degrees of granularity, but each of them follow the same operational model. So you see here, we've got a large system, which is the meta system, operational units exchanging in an external environment. And here we've got a small viable system here, another one, another. So you've got 3 viable system models within the larger viable system model. And so this is almost like elephants all the way down. Holons, between holons, between holons, between holons. That each is an operational unit in itself, buried and embedded in a larger operational units. And so you can really get a mapping of an organization regardless of how complex that organization is. When you map an organization against this, you really begin to see what is going on in the organization, and in particular, the relationships between each of these operational units and each of these meta systems. All right. So here's another example where we're talking just about that. The meta system engaging with the operational unit engaging with the external environment. We've got 1 degree of recursion down here, an operational unit. And in that operational, you see smaller operational units. And this can go all the way down or all the way up. So when you're looking at an organization, you're getting a layered identification of what's happening in an organization and the interrelationships between all these things that are happening. All right, so I might just sort of stop there for a moment and just sort of field some questions around what you see here and what prompts you to want to ask at this point in time. William? Yeah.
Yeah, Ron, what happens if there's multiple heads up there, like,
Yeah.
multiple control centers? What goes on there?
So
Because the control center isn't really,
Mhm.
it's not as holarchic, it seems, or as the operations
Yeah.
is like easier to replicate,
Yeah.
but not the top. But I can see the need to do so at times.
This does borrow on hierarchy. There is a hierarchy, and at the top of the hierarchy, you would think that the intelligence and the policy, let's just say, I know we're talking about, let's just say we have an intelligence and policy that is operating at first tier spiral dynamics, right? And it's looking out into the environment. How they see the world and how they set policy will obviously impact the control and the coordination of the operational units. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just say you have at the top of the hierarchy, you have an organization that is at second tier. They are looking into the future in a more holistic way. seeing what's happening, their policy would be different to a first-tier policy. And so how they coordinate and control their operational units would be different. And you would think more holistic, hopefully. So
Right.
yes, there is a possibility of the mindset of who's ever looking into the future and the policy will affect the system. One thing,
So,
yeah.
what happens if there's a subsidiary? If we
Mm-hmm.
use the analogy of a corporation with multiple subsidiaries,
Yep.
and each subsidiary has its own
Mm-hmm.
control system,
Yeah,
how does does this model reflect that reality?
absolutely. One of the aims of the viable system model is to give each operational unit autonomy to function, right? Autonomy to function in their own right, how they see that they should be functioning, as long as it does not impact the viability of the whole system, right? So operational autonomy to control and coordinate their facet of what they do at their level is important, right? As long as it doesn't jeopardize the viability of the complete system. Does that make sense, William? Yeah.
Yes.
And so that autonomy, if you like, there's autonomy at the big end of the system. There's also autonomy at each level of recursion. And this gives people a responsibility and authority to make decisions where it is at their level. So in other words, they do what they see needs to be done, but they're not divorced of anything. As human beings, we are part of a larger system. If we do something that upsets the meta system, let's just say, for instance, as human beings, if we continue to um, you know, use plastics, for instance, right? If we continue to use plastics, which at a point in time was convenient, but now that's beginning to jeopardize the viability of the planetary system, right? We need to do something about, bringing that into line. And we do that in two ways in the cybernetics model. We do it two ways. We need to attenuate, we need to reduce, or we need to multiply. All right. So let's just say, someone in control of an operating system here realize it needs to reduce wastage. It would do so. It would send a message to the operational system saying we need to cut down on your plastics. But we don't want you to jeopardize the overall functioning of the whole system because that could make us unviable. So the operational unit might be saying, well, I can do that by using paper packaging instead of using plastic packaging. And so that goes back up the chain to coordination, say, give me more materials that will be more environmentally friendly, give me less materials which will be environmentally detrimental. Dialogue begins to happen between the operational units and the meta system. All right. Cool. Yeah, bet.
Good question. So I think going along with what William was asking, what
Mm-hmm.
if we go to the real human, like one person
Yeah.
who wants to go to bed early, but for
Mm-hmm.
some reason at 9 p.m., they open up Facebook and start scrolling and then messaging, and they stay up every night till 1 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
rage posting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one part of their control system says we need to go to bed at 9, and the other
Mm-hmm.
part of the control system is like, no, let's rage post all night.
Yeah.
So how do you model that, and how does that work?
So you're having the relationship there, you have a polarity. Yeah. You have a polarity or a dilemma to be managed. So that's a great example of when you begin to go into polarity management within an organization. Hey, what is the advantage of you being up all night on Facebook sending out messages, right? What's the disadvantage of you being up all night, going on messages? And then the opposite party, what is the advantage of that person being up all night, sending email messages out? What's the disadvantage of that for you, right? So you begin to see that you work with the tensions within the organization and find the polarities that exist between individuals, between departments, between operational units, between the operational units and the meta system. And when you dissolve those polarities, what you generally find is more energy to do what needs to be done. Make sense, Beth?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Keep
Yeah.
going, Ron. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting discussion during our discussion session, but this is such
Cool.
great stuff. I'm really enjoying it.
Okay, good, terrific. All right. So, a couple of more slides and then we'll go to that. The systemic principle of the VSM is the law of variety and balance. So within any organization, there is a lot of variety. There's a lot of individuals, there's a lot of departments potentially, there's a lot of structures, right? It's about how do we get that variety into some sort of balance? And how do we bring the equanimity between individuals, the equanimity between departments, equanimity between operational units, so that there's maximum functioning. It's like the human being. When we are optimized, all the systems are in balance, right? We're eating the right food. We're getting the right amount of exercise. We have a healthy, open mindset looking into the future. We internalize what we see in the future. We begin to operate more succinctly based upon what we see as emerging in the future and how we can maximize our ability to function in that environment. No different for an organization. An organization is just an entity that has to work with this variety and get things into balance. When there is dysfunction in organizations, it's when things are out of balance and not in alignment. All right, so done. Questions?
All right. Do you want to stop sharing so we can see each other's faces? All right. So I'm going to go first. Hi, everybody. Okay. So what happens when we have these different departments and I'll just give Verizon. I worked at Verizon for many years, and they basically saw that VoIP was eating their standard POTS, plain old telephone service product. So they decided to launch their own VoIP because Vonage back then was eating their business model. So I think it's called the incumbent or the incumbent dilemma, or there's a name for this. So when departments are basically competing for each other's businesses,
Yeah.
how does that look and how does that balance out? Because you do need to innovate. The innovator's dilemma, that's what it's called. So I'll stop there and let you answer that question.
Terrific. Okay, so there's a number of factors there, and there's a number of conversations that go on there. Obviously, looking out into the future, they did not anticipate a new model which was on the horizon, right? First of all, so their intelligence wasn't really up to speed. So they were caught short, right? They realized that there was another model coming in, and what they tried to do was assimilate that into their operational procedure or product. It may not have worked because the coordination, which is really systems two's work, coordination really needs to balance, what is important when, what should we be doing next, what is our priority. So you could say even within the organization as an operational unit, it didn't have its priorities right of what it was emphasizing and what it wasn't. You could say the marketing department wasn't optimizing or looking into the future. You could say even the salespeople were actually selling something which was obsolete. And so that would causing a problem. So the whole thing is always in a state of flux, is always in movement. It always means that we need to be looking outside and what's next and maximizing our operational inside and now. And the tensions occur all the time. As far as, working with organizations, our role sometimes is to how do we minimize those tensions? How do we help them see the tensions? How do we mitigate the tensions? What do we have to amplify? What do we have to reduce about the system? Is that?
I really appreciate that. But I'll let other folks, this is the best thing ever, by the way. I'm really excited about it, as you know. Who else has questions out there?
I have a question concerning the four quadrants. How does this model fit the four quadrants, or how does the four quadrants fit this model?
I love your question there, William. I'm going to have to put screen share back on again to answer that. Let me just go there. Let me, hold on. Is that sharing now? Hold
Yes.
on.
Well, kind of.
Kind of. Let me.
It says you started it, but there it is.
Hold on. I just need to move you there. There we go. Hold on. Make that bigger. All right. So, William, to answer your question there, and this is far too complex a slide for us to cover today, and I'm not attempting to going to do it. But here you have a combination of the viable systems model, the integral AQAL framework, and Beck and Cowan's organizational design flow, right? So let me just take one example. Let's just say up here, right? Charting big pictures, patterns, and flows, right? This is very much a systems 4 activity, looking at what's outside and next, right? So this is part of a strategic foresight initiative of an organization. And so what might happen here is the system 4 AQAL scanning, what got us here? We have to look through each of the 4 quadrants. What got us here mentally? What got us here behaviorally? What got us here culturally? What got us here systemically? We need to look at that from that perspective. Next is scanning again, paradigm, worldview, what's going on straight down now in our organization, what's going on behaviorally, mentally, culturally, and systemically, what's going on in operations right here and right now. We need to look through that framework. And system 4 scanning, forward views, what's coming our way. So we have to look at what's coming our way for us mentally, what's coming our way behaviorally, what do we have to change, what skills do we need to increase, what do we have to do about our culture in order to be able to adapt to what's coming, and what do we have to do with regards to our system. So that's just one sort of way of looking at the quadrants through that system 4 perspective. Yeah. So that's one sort of thought.
So basically, when you use the model as a brainstorming tool or a research tool, that's when you bring in AQAL, basically,
absolutely,
to do the analysis.
Yeah.
Knowing that you need to have all these specific places covered.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the center here, you'll see when you come to, establishing set points, identify cultural fuels and dysfunction, right? If you have developed and propagated a very system 5 policy, system 5 purpose, system 5 vision, that's very, very clear. And when you then begin to look at how your organization is functioning, and you've got individuals who are, or culture, if you like, who are not in alignment with your purpose and vision, that's going to be a dysfunction. if you have skills which are not in line with your vision, mission, vision, and purpose of your System 5 policy, and they're going out the other way, that's going to have dysfunction. So the whole idea is how do we bring into alignment the various energetic aspects of culture and individual mindset and behaviors in order to be more succinct in moving towards our System 5 policy of this is our vision, this is our purpose, this is our mission, this is what we want to achieve. And so that then begins to give you an idea of what you have to do in terms of interventions at an individual level, a cultural level, or even a systemic level. Yeah.
So can I use this model to eliminate everyone who's at the green stage of development to get rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, I mean, I mean, variety. It's about variety. But there is, in a sense, a way in which that variety has to function in a way which is in balance. So how do we find that way to function in balance with diversity and variety? Which is really a second-tier question, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just joking.
All right. Well, that was really cool. Do you want to go ahead and stop sharing again?
Yeah.
I hope everyone took a screenshot.
Just quickly,
Yeah.
applications from small business work groups to entire nation states. As I said, Stafford Beer was a British cybernetics. He applied it in the steel industry. The Chilean government had a project in the 1970s where they applied the viable systems model. It's been applied in manufacturing, healthcare, education, non-profit collectives as a way of understanding what's going on. All right, done.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and stop sharing. Thank you.
I'm trying to
I
find
have
out.
so many
Yeah.
questions, but let's hear from some of the folks who haven't asked anything yet. Otherwise, Bill and I, or William and I, are just going to hog the whole time. Anyone else have anything? Go
Karen.
ahead.
Yes, actually, this is a bit over my head. I've never had much to do with organizations, but I'm kind of seeing it in the larger AQAL framework, which I'm very familiar with. So my question to you, this is a support pod. In theory, not always in practice, but in theory, people who present here come because there's the potential for ILiA or some of us individually to be of support for you and your project. Is there, and so I'm wondering, was this a way of sharing something that you think is wonderful and groovy, or is there a further layer here? Is there any way in which ILiA could, or some other organization like ILiA could be of support to something you're doing with this? How could we be of support?
Well, this kind of conversation came out of Marco's presentation last month, where he was talking about the conscious cooperative, I think it is. Yeah.
Yes.
And they were just looking at different models or cutting edge models that
Yes.
might be more applicable. And I think we spoke about there about old wine in, well, new wine in old wineskins, right?
Yes.
And some of the organizational structures we have today are not conducive to the new wine of the new ways of thinking. And so the viable systems model has the potential to be that new wineskin, where organizations like Marco's are able to maybe fine-tune their organization so it's more in line with a more flexible, dynamic environment or way of operating, which is, you know, different to some of this very staid and tight structures that sometimes we're trying to fit our organizations into. They don't often work. They break apart.
We'll send this to Marco.
Yeah.
Yes. The thing
to
yeah, so they are massively redoing Cosmos Co-op because it's suddenly expanding. So this might be a very, so the way we could be of support to everybody is to put you in touch with Marco. Maybe Ellen Cool, I think she's dealing with the organizational side, but yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, cool.
This is great.
No problem.
So we are unfortunately out of time. I don't know where it went, but thank you, Ron. I can tell there's a lot more. Is there websites that you've built or other places to go to read more about this? No.
If you just do a Google on Stafford beer, you'll find more information. Don't do a Google of Ron Laurie on viable systems model. I'm notoriously not very upfront with that stuff, only because of my lack of ability to do it. I'm just an individual, just trying to apply different techniques and approaches. I've had success with this. I'm happy to share it.
Well, it's really fascinating. So I actually in line with this very well. I wrote an article today. I don't know if you saw it, Karen. It's
Not
called
yet.
Startup Planet. Startup Planet. So the idea is to reframe our brain. And Susan, you're going to love this. You're going to love this. Okay. It's to reframe our brain that we're this old legacy planet with all these old systems. We're tied down. Instead, say, hey, we're a startup planet. We're the first of many, where there's going to be a whole series of planets. Humans are going to go to all the other planets. We're the first. This is new. Everything's new. Let's keep innovating. Let's be agile. Let's try new things. Don't change your mind from the victim mindset with the trauma triangle, the drama triangle. Say, hey, we're the creators of this planet. Let's keep trying and don't get bogged down. It's the mindset of being bogged down that's stopping us. I know, Susan, you're going to resonate with that. So go and check my Substack. I think I did a really good job. I've got so much engagement on this thing. I can't even believe how many people are already writing messages on there. And you know, Suzanne, that's the hardest thing, is getting people to engage. Every week, Suzanne is like, please engage. So yeah, it's really good. And I think we're all probably trying to get the good ideas out there. All right, so let me do some announcements really quickly before we run. So ILiA, Integral Leadership in Action, is a nonprofit that is all about supporting leaders. Today, we did our general support pod, but we have 3 support pods. Integral Life Practices is going to be starting in July. Monday, July 14th, we're having Larry O'Connor kick it off. It's going to be how do we support each other as leaders with integral life practices based on the book, Integral Life Practices. And then Monday, the 7th, I should have said that one first, Karen Voorhees was going to be talking about the vision for Creative Writers Support Pod in collaboration with other organizations, including Marcos, which is Cosmos Co-op. All right, and with that, we will see you all next month. I'm going to post this video. You guys all have a wonderful month, and see you next time. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.